Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the astrology of May 2022. I hope that you're doing well out there and hanging in there at the end of April here and the upcoming eclipse season, and starting to feel some of the changes in the earth moving beneath your feet. But I hope that you're finding at least some peace and stability throughout all of that. I am looking over here in the chat. If you're just joining us, please tell me where you're joining me from and let me know that you're here. It's always really wonderful to see all of your smiling faces here in the chat and see where you're joining me from all different corners of the world. I wanted to say thank you to all of you who have been sending me support and well wishes over the past week or two. For those of you who didn't know, my mom passed last week and been processing that. And I wanted to show you a card just to start out today before we get into it, because I feel like I've really experienced this card over the last few weeks, the pluses and the minuses of it. And that's the Five of Cups, which is associated with the first decan of Scorpio. And you can see that you have a figure here that is cloaked in black and is in mourning with 3 spilled cups. But one of the really most interesting things about this card is the 2 cups that are still standing behind him. And I've been really feeling this lately, just mourning the loss of the past and of my mom, but also feeling just so very blessed and grateful for my community, for my family, and for the things that still remain. So I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, and it's really important to me, all of those words of affirmation and kindness that people have shown me. So it really does make me feel supported. So again, big thanks to you. I think that when we go through challenging times like this, having the support of friends and family is one of the most important things and one of the greatest wealths that we can have. So I just wanted to say that and kind of reiterate how grateful I am for all of you. I'm looking at the chat here and seeing a few friends stopping by. Remco is joining us from the Netherlands. Nice to see you, my friend. Celia is stopping in from Spain. Welcome, Celia. Place of Stillness, Manuela is here from Sweden. Welcome, my friend. And if you're just joining us in digital land, please drop me a note here in the chat box. We're probably going to go maybe a few hours today. We'll see how we're doing. If you have questions about the things that we're talking about today, please put them in the chat. I always love, teaching or helping to bring clarity to things. Henry is joining us from Kentucky. Thank you, Henry, for the kind words as well. Lynn is joining us from Vermont. Welcome, Lynn. Nice to see you here. Tanya is giving me the purple heart. Thank you, Tanya, for being here. Tanya is stopping in from Jacksonville, Florida. We've got a few Tanyas here in the chat sometimes. Yana is here today. Welcome, Yana. Thank you for the nice note that you sent me. I really appreciate that. And X is here from Vancouver Island. Yes, we've got some new folks in the chat today. It's always wonderful, like I said, to see all of you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through the astrology of May, which is fairly significant. We've got still some pretty significant movement in the sky at the end of this month. We'll try to process the end of April and how that's going to affect the beginning of our May. We're going to go through one decan at a time. So a decan is a 10-degree section of the zodiac. So we'll start off this talk with the sun in the second decan of Taurus, and we'll talk a little bit about that, give you a little bit of a preview of my decans workshop that I'm going to be doing on Saturday, May the 14th. So if you are interested in going on a deep dive into Taurus archetypes and the decans and the tarot, the fixed stars, the mythology, all of the kind of things that I try to weave together in these live streams, please join me for that. You can see a link to sign up in the description of this video. I am still doing readings as well, so if you are in need of some guidance during these challenging times, please reach out, and I'll try to do the best that I can and try to bring some clarity to it. We've got a few more people joining. Cookerzilla is here from Mahone Bay. Thank you, Cookerzilla, for joining today. Again, let me know if you're here in the chat. It's always nice to see everyone. Do me a favor too, if you're just joining us, one of the easiest things you can do to support the channel here is hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, please be a subscriber and you can find out when we're going live again. We usually go live 3 or 4 times a month, and we've been building some great friendships from all over the world here. Jody is here from Florida. It says, hi, Spencer and friends. Greetings from South Florida, stopping in from work. Well, thank you, Jody, for joining us today. I hope that you are doing well also, and that things in your experience right now are peaceful. All right, so I'm going to kind of give us an overview of the things that we're experiencing here. Again, May 14th, Decans of Taurus. Please join me. It's a Saturday, excuse me, 1 p.m. Reach out for readings. If you'd like to make a material donation to the work that we're doing here today, I'll get it. I'll spit it out. There is a little $sign at the chat. It's called a super chat or a super sticker, and that supports the work that I'm doing, as well as you can donate at buymeacoffee.com. All right, so we've gotten all our business out of the way here, and I'm just going to kind of start going over some of the big picture thoughts that I have for the month here. First of all, I want to wish you all happy Earth Day. Today is Earth Day, so we will kind of start exploring some of the earthy parts of Taurus, which in general to me is something that is usually a peaceful, beautiful time. I have a moon in Taurus, so it's usually one of my favorite times of the year. Although I will say this Taurus season, as well as every Taurus season since Uranus has been in Taurus, has been a little bit of a shakeup. A time period where we normally are kind of building our foundations and kind of getting into a place of calmness and enjoying the spring weather. There's a little bit of curveballs and surprises that get thrown our way with Uranus in Taurus here. The other challenge that I think we have with Taurus season right now is Saturn is in what is called an overcoming square to the Taurus sun and all of the planets in Taurus. And that's a condition in Hellenistic astrology that makes it sort of difficult for the planets that Saturn is witnessing and providing testimony for and aspecting. So there may be some feelings of limitation that come through this Taurus season where we might want to do certain things, we might want to plant certain seeds, but there are larger considerations that we're having to take into account. So that is something that I wanted to point out. We're going to have a number of lunations this month. We're going to begin this month around the 1st, just coming off the new moon solar eclipse in Taurus 2. So I'll break down Taurus 2 in a second, but that's something to keep in mind as we start the month, is that we are fully in the midst of eclipse season. And eclipse seasons are always shaking things up. They are chapter markers. There is people like to say that they're portals where energy can come in and go out. I think that I've said this before, but I wanted to say it again, as I think that the word portal is overused in our divinatory practices. But I do think that eclipses in general, if any type of divination or, I don't know, aspectual relationship would represent a portal, I think it would be an eclipse, because traditionally the nodes of the moon, which is, I'll show you this, I'll pull my screen up and we'll start diving into it here. So you can see here, this is my chart for May 1st, but I just want to go back one more day just to see, because it's actually pretty important, showing the last day that we have here of April. You can see here we've got a 10-degree Taurus sun and moon that is fairly close to the north node of the moon. Okay, so here we have the north and the south node of the moon. They are always exactly opposite one another. And when we have a new or a full moon near one of those nodal points, that's when we have an eclipse. Okay, so the ancients would think of these north and south nodes in a couple of different ways. In the Hellenistic way of thinking about it, the north node was a point of increase, where we had the energy coming into the world, and the south node was a point of decrease, where things were leaving the world, where we were wrapping up loose ends and composting. We have a Vedic understanding and Vedic mythology surrounding those nodes that are related to dragons and serpents, where we had the severed head of a dragon or of a demon that wanted to steal the elixir of life, and that's called Rahu. So that's the north node being related to Rahu, this severed head that is trying to acquire something, maybe even materially, and this hunger that can never be satisfied. Whereas the south node was called Ketu, and that was the body, the dismembered body of that demon that was processing all of these old experiences. So I think that one of the ways that I differ from maybe some more modern evolutionary perspectives is that I don't think we necessarily are trying to move towards one or the other. I don't necessarily believe that it's the quote-unquote evolution of the soul as well. I do think that if we think about it objectively as increase and decrease, desire versus processing, and really try to balance those two energies out and those two ways of thinking about it out, I think we're going to have a much more rich experience of it without making the mistake of thinking that, well, we have to let go of any qualities that are associated with this south node, or we can only do the work of the north node. I think that that's something where we can really maybe go astray on some level. So this eclipse that we have at the end of April going into, we're going to keep feeling this at the beginning of May, is a Rahu eclipse. So this is where energy is coming in, where we may be having a really powerful new beginning. New moons in general are powerful seeding events, but this when we have an eclipse period, a solar eclipse as we have here, it's an even more powerful seeding experience. Now, I do want to also give you a heads up that the ancients believed that eclipses were malefic events. They were, think about it like this. You're in the ancient world. You don't have a super solid Cartesian understanding of science, and you see the sun starting to black out and turn off. And that's probably, you're like, wow, that's probably not good, because the sun or the moon is life-giving. So the two lights are bodies in the sky that were revered as not only as deities, but the givers of life. And when they became darkened or were shut off, that was pretty scary for people in the ancient world. So this is why you see a lot of people talk about eclipses being really challenging, because something is getting turned off, and so that something else can be born. And that's part of just being cyclical and cyclical reality. I'm taking a look at the chat here. Henry says, Spencer, I keep meaning to tell you how much I enjoy hearing from you. My brother is a 12th house Cancer sun with a Scorpio moon. It's Mercury in Leo, and he's a big guy with huge curls. All right. Well, I'm glad I remind you of someone that you care about, and that I'm able to continue to kind of do the work here, even throughout some of the changes. I think that that's one of the things I've really wanted to commit to, is even though I'm going through some really challenging times, not only with the loss of my mom, but a lot of shakeups in my living situation. My daughter is growing up and going to college soon, so there's a lot of changes going on. There's some things going on with my house where there's a lot of repairs and things like that are having to be done in a very short period of time. So, but I say all that not as an excuse, but just to say that it's okay to kind of just show up and not completely maybe be at your 100% best or most centered, because I think that's how life goes. We're not always going to have the perfect circumstances. And I think that integrity is kind of doing the best that you can in the moment that you have, despite what's going on around you. So that's why I just wanted to be here with all of you throughout all of this, because I think we can learn from each other through these experiences, that we don't have to feel 100% glossy all the time. And that's tough for a Leo ascendant like me to say, as sometimes I want to go run and hide if I'm not feeling my best. But I think just showing up is important, and it creates trust between all of you and me as well. So thank you, Henry. I'm happy to be here with you. Andrea is joining us from Croatia, Space Tiger. It's wonderful to see you, my friend. Yevgen, thank you for your kind words and for participating today. Kate is joining us from New Hampshire. Welcome, Kate. Yeah, and Kate's saying that their K2 is conjoined Uranus, so maybe there will be some familiar chaos. Yes. Well, we'll see what it brings. All right, so that's sort of a primer on eclipse, how eclipses work, like what they may be bringing us. I had a wonderful guest on last week that was really holding some beautiful space for me, Shu Yap from Australia, who was talking about sort of the meta cycles related to new and full moons and also to eclipses. And we can see these eclipses being related to time frames that are, I believe that there's about an 18-year cycle. I might be a little bit off on my years with that. But there is a meta cycle that we're experiencing as well. So I want you to go back in back into your, your journals, your memory banks, and see what was happening when the nodes were in Scorpio and Taurus previously, because that can give you a lot of insight as to some of the things that might be coming up for you now. Okay, so that's really what we're starting off with this new moon solar eclipse energy, a brand new start. Many of us have been going through a letting go period to prepare us for this new start. I think this is one of the things that Saturn in the third decan of Aquarius has been bringing us, is the need to move beyond the old karmic ties. And I'm showing you here the Seven of Swords card, which Austin Coppock calls the knot. So he talks about the frustration necessary sort of to get kind of, I don't know what the word would be, to feel enough anger or frustration. I don't know if anger is the right word, but discontent, that's the word I'm looking for. Enough discontent to actually make the change and say, you know what, I really do need to make a change. And we are going to see this with the I-Ching reading that I did today, is that it really is time to move on. And we really have to commit to it 100% to be able to be successful with it. This isn't a time for half measures. This is a time really for committing to the action. So Saturn may be bringing that to us. Now, we also are fresh off a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, where we were seeing certain things dissolving to be able to bring something new into our experience. And then at this eclipse as well, we have a Venus-Neptune, Venus and Neptune are close together, but Venus and Jupiter are conjoining at Venus's degree of exaltation, which I think could be very positive. I know that eclipses generally are malefic events, according to the tradition, but there are also some simultaneous, very positive aspects happening, like a Jupiter Venus conjunction at Venus's degree of exaltation. I mean, that is, I don't know if it gets much better than that as far as a conjoining of two planets. Those are the two benefics coming together in a very powerful place for both of them, the house of Jupiter and the exaltation of Venus. So maybe through some of these challenging events, we are having some beauty come out of it. That degree of Pisces is in the third decan, which has a 10 of Cups tarot card related to it. Here you can see this beautiful rainbow and this happy family, this idealistic vision. So we may be really working with an idealistic vision and maybe the fruition of something that we've cherished for a long time. And I can say that even though I've gone through some losses, there are definitely some things that I'm going through that are maybe the manifestation of a dream as well. So life doesn't have to be one thing or the other. We can experience pain and joy and suffering and pleasure simultaneously. In fact, I think that that's more realistic than thinking about, well, it's all good all the time or everything's bad all the time. I mean, that's the gray area that we have to learn to reconcile, is that sometimes these things can happen all at once. And, it's not just one way or the other. EK is joining us from Madison. Welcome, Beth. Nice to see you here. And Kate says Uranus makes sense here now for those not letting go. Yeah, I think that's key. When we're looking at this eclipse, right? We're looking at this eclipse. Uranus is a big part of it. So we're going to need to do something in a different way than we've done it in the past. Our foundations, our routines, the way that we deal with material resources is going to have to go through a process of shakeup. And if we're not willing to do it consciously, Uranus is the type of planet that will bring it to us whether we want it or not. I'm always surprised by the manifestations, even if I see it coming. It's always a surprise. It's that lightning bolt of awareness. But I think that when we get that lightning bolt, the first reaction is shock, and we also are shocked into clarity. I think sometimes. I think that when you see lightning and you hear a thunderbolt, you're like, your adrenaline wakes you up because you feel that sense of danger. But in the I-Ching, they talk about Hexagram 51 shock, which I think is related to Uranus, in my opinion, just seeing a synchronicity between them. They talk about the shock and then the laughing afterwards, right? Because you're like, oh, wow, that really jolted me out of this lethargy or this slumber. And now my senses are ready, and I'm ready to maybe potentially take an action due to that new clarity. So this could be another manifestation of this eclipse season, having Uranus playing such a pivotal role within that, is that there may be things that shock us into clarity, but also will allow us to get out of a rut. I think that's what this Uranus and Taurus 2 is really talking about. Dimfy is joining us from the Netherlands. Hello, Dimfy. Nice to see you. Lynn says, learning to live with ambivalence is the key to adulting. 100%. Yeah, I agree with that, Lynn. I think that we have these sometimes as youthful, naive young people. We want things to be one way or the other, and we get frustrated because sometimes we feel like fate is conspiring against us. And as we get older, we start to learn what limitations that we actually do have to work within and which ones we can let go of. So I agree with that, and I think that's a wise statement. Jody's saying, I haven't seen many great things happening during the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. I also lost my mom Easter morning. I'm sorry, Jody. I know you and I had been talking about that, and my heart goes out to you, and I'm right there with you. So, it's always a difficult thing, no matter how old or how sick they had been. My mom had been, she had a stroke a few years ago and had been in declining health for a couple of years now, but it's still a shock. It's still difficult. And just reach out to the people that you care about. And we're here for you as well, Jody. Hopefully we'll be able to bring you a little bit of peace just by our presence together today. Maria says, joining us from Belgrade, Serbia. Welcome, Maria. I think that's how I say your name. Thank you for your kind words as well. We have, let's see. Yeah, we've got some kind words and condolences for Jody. Yeah, again, this is the type of thing that we see in the Five of Cups, is we experience a loss, but sometimes there's little silver linings that come out of it, and we don't necessarily have to ignore the loss and warp speed through the loss. I think grief and mourning is very important, and I think that that's something in our culture that we try to skirt over and say, well, you're going to be stronger for it. Maybe that's true, but on some level, sometimes it's just painful, and it's okay to acknowledge that. And I hope that we can create space for all of you to have honesty in your feelings, even if you're not at your best. So again, trying to hold space for all of you here today. So shakeups in our routines. One thing I wanted to, let me just give you a little bit of an overview as we get further into depth here, because what I'm going to do is I'll give you some of the big picture thoughts, and then I'm going to go and I'm going to explain a preview of the decans, because we're going to, when the sun moves through these decans, it basically shines a light of awareness and clarity on some of those issues. And those are that becomes some of the canvas of our shared experience that we're having an awareness of. So we have this eclipse on the 30th of April. We're going to see a first quarter moon. Let's go through all the lunations. A first quarter moon on the 8th of May at 18 degrees of Leo. So we're going to have a square between the moon in Leo and the moon and the sun in Taurus. On the 16th, the culmination of this April 30th eclipse is happening with a full moon lunar eclipse at 25 degrees of Scorpio. I'll break that down when we get to it. But we have that's a pretty challenging lunation. Saturn will be squared that eclipse almost exactly. The moon will be in its fall, and the sun will be on a fixed star called Algol, which is one of the more difficult fixed stars in the sky. In Chinese astrology and mythology, they called it piled up corpses. So some tough energy that hopefully I'll be able to maybe help us navigate with myth. So keep your eyes peeled for that. There will be a last quarter moon on the 22nd of May at 1 degree of Pisces, where it will be squaring the sun newly ingressed into Gemini. That may reflect some of the desire to go internal with the moon in Pisces 1, and the desire or the awareness, if we bring in the key words for the sun, awareness of the multiplicity of pathways that we could take, the choices. So there may be a conflict between external action and choice and wanting to go off into our own internal worlds and our imagination. So that's the 22nd. And then at the end of the month on the 30th, which by the way was my mom's birthday. So happy birthday to you. Happy heavenly birthday to you, Mom, on the 30th of May. There will be a new moon at 9 degrees of Gemini. So we'll break that down as well. Now, there are a few ingresses in this month as well. Venus will start out the month in the last degrees of Pisces, as we're seeing on this chart here. And I'm going to click this forward to May. Okay, so this is where everything is starting. We'll have a tiny, tiny sliver of Venus in Pisces. And that will be the host of the sun for a period of time. So for the end of this month until the beginning of May, the Taurus sun is hosted by a very dignified Venus. Once we hit the beginning of May, Venus is going to move into her exile in Aries. So an uncomfortable place for Venus. The other thing that's happening when this happens, and I'll just show you, is that when Venus moves into Aries here, it's also moving into what's called an aversion to the sun, a blind spot. So not only is Venus moving into a place that it's not super comfortable, it doesn't have its resources, it's in the house of Mars, where it's trying to create unity in a place of conflict and separation. It also will not be able to witness and bear testimony to the sun, which will make for some difficulty, I think. Sometimes this is something, according to another astrologer, Martine Hermes, who draws heavily on Robert Schmidt, the exaltation lord can take over. So in the case for Taurus, the moon is the exaltation lord. And in this case, the moon isn't witnessing as well, but we may have to rely on maybe some lunar help as the moon moves through these different positions. So we may be really reliant on the moon for some of our solar help this month, as Venus, because Venus isn't really able to do much. Yes, yeah. Jody's asking if Pluto just stationed. Remco, you are correct. Pluto was stationing on the 30th of April, so we are also reviewing some of our systems that may be needing transformation. I guess that's the cliched word, but I think that anytime we see Pluto doing something, we're having to deal with something that was repressed. And I think that if we deal with it consciously, we can maybe utilize it with grace. If we don't acknowledge it, it can start acting behind the scenes like a cancer, right? Like something that is growing invisibly that could be wreaking havoc on our systems and creating corruption and instability. So we may have to review some of those things, especially when it comes to how we administrate our collected resources, our political systems, the way that we govern our life is what Pluto is maybe looking for in the third decan of Capricorn. And Kate is saying that Aphrodite being consumed by Aries. Yeah, I think that what happens when Venus moves into Aries here, as we're seeing at the beginning of the month, is that normally Venus would be a planet that would, I guess depending on its phase, I'll make a caveat here. Sometimes there are astrologers that talk about the morning star Venus, which we're seeing here when it rises before the sun, being more of a warrior Venus, right? And the evening star being more of that conciliatory peacemaker. And that may be true. But also we're seeing generally Venus significations talk about receptivity, being able to receive good fortune by becoming open to it. And when we have Venus moving into Aries, a lot of the times with clients that I see and with just significant events in the world, we get a little bit impatient and we try to pursue something that would be better served by becoming open to and being receptive to. So, Venus becomes very young in Aries, or in Aries, in Aries' house. So I guess would just be careful that you're not trying to overly pursue something that would be better served by letting it come to you, because sometimes you can even drive away the object of your desire by over pursuit. Okay, so those are our lunations. That's the condition of the host of the sun moving forward through the beginning of the month. We will see Jupiter also moving into Aries on the 10th of May. The sun will move into Gemini on the 20th of May. And then we're going to have, over the course of the month, Mercury is stationing retrograde, and it's going to make its inferior conjunction. I'll talk about that in a second. Excuse me. And it will eventually retrograde back into the third decan of Taurus on the 22nd. On the 24th, Mars will move into Aries and gain a lot of dignity. So Venus is losing dignity this month for May, going from her exaltation to her exile, and Mars will be gaining a lot of dignity as we go to the end of the month. So there may be more conflicts. There may be more drive. Maybe we have more energy towards the end of the month, potentially. We may be able to carve our own path rather than have to make adjustments to others, or we may desire that. I think that's the other thing. A lot of the times where the planets are at, that can reflect, the type of influences that we may be feeling. So we may desire to strike out on our own a little bit more towards the end of the month and create some more sovereignty and independence. On the 28th, Venus will move into Taurus. So, Venus is moving pretty quickly through Aries here. And eventually, by the end of the month, she will be in her own domicile once again, in a place where she can create fertility through being receptive, like the earth, like the fallow ground, or the fertile ground. I don't know, fallow may not be the right word. Mixing up my ground adjectives here. Fecundity, right? That's Austin Kopic's favorite word, fertility, fecundity. Venus will be able to receive when she's in Taurus. So those are our ingresses. We have a couple solar phases this month as well. On the 5th of May, the sun will be conjoining Uranus, right? So we have a renewal of that Uranian energy potentially. And that's going to shake up our routines and our systems, as we'll see as I dive into the second decan of Taurus in a minute here. Mercury will station retrograde on the 10th, as well as move under the sun's beams. So Mercury is going to be going through some changes. We're going to have the retrograde at about 4 degrees of Gemini, and then it's going to move under the sun's beams, which is within the 15-degree mark of the sun. So this is Hermes going into the underworld as psychopomp, maybe trying to retrieve some information that we were lacking the first time around in this cycle. And then eventually we will have Mercury's cazimi, or inferior conjunction, with the sun on the 21st of May at 0 degrees of Gemini, which is, that seems to me like a very powerful cazimi, because we have Mercury in its own house at a 0 degree point. That could be a very, very interesting cazimi, especially for, I think, for, taking a new path, for learning something new, a new system of learning. And I'll get into that as we approach it on the daily. One other thing I've been trying to incorporate into these forecasts is the condition of moon out of bounds, and that's a condition where the moon is outside of the normal declination or path of the sun, above or below the ecliptic. And it can be a period of time where our emotions may feel a little bit extreme, and we may be receiving intuitions or things of that nature that may be sort of out of the collective norm. So we will have a moon out of bounds period from May the 3rd to May the 7th, and then May the 18th to May the 20th, and then at the end of the month from May 30th to June the 4th. So something to keep in mind as well. If you're like, why am I feeling so emotional? Like, why am I just flipping out? Like, sometimes the moon out of bounds can speak to that. It doesn't always have to be bad. It can, sometimes when we are allowed to feel our feelings, we can get some really great insights with that. And it can be really, really healing and cathartic to express those feelings on some level as well. So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. All right, so those, I think, are some of the big picture lunations, ingresses, planets moving into new signs, solar phases, which I think are important for people to recognize in the astrological, pantheon of techniques, and then the moon out of bounds. We're going to be dealing with a hexagram this week, number 49 to 43, which is revolution to resolution, and I'll explain that at the end of the show. And the animal that we have that we're going to explore is the guinea pig, which is a funny little animal that I think is speaking towards being social on some level. It's a very social animal. So I'll break down both of those at the end of the show as well. Okay, how y'all doing out there? Everyone doing okay? Yeah, Kate says, my Pluto keyword, tectonic plates. I like that. Because it's Pluto associated with Hades, Lord of the underworld, and literally the earth shifting underneath your feet, all this magma, this molten earth creating new earth, like that's kind of the beauty of it. It breaks things down, but then there are things that are built from it. So it can be both a destructive force and a creative one. So I think that's a nice keyword there, Kate. Andrea says, great time for deep meditation and stillness when the moon is out of bound. I like that. I think anytime we can still the mind, still the emotions, come to a place of centeredness, we can take actions from that place that may be more well thought out, that may be less rash or less based on impulsivity, which I think will be important, especially as we move forward to the third decan of Taurus and that full moon lunar eclipse that we're going to see on the 16th. Okay, so I'm gonna pop out of here for a second, and I'm going to show you and kind of give you some background on the second decan of Taurus, which is where we're going to begin our month. So there's a story that these decans are describing, and in the first decan of Taurus here, we see the 5 of Pentacles. We're moving to the 5, 6, and 7 of Pentacles. So at the end of April, we have this experience that we're going through right now as we're doing this live stream of a Mercury-ruled decan, where we see 2 figures that are destitute outside of a church in the snow. And this card seems to reflect a need to plan for future prosperity to avoid destitution. This card was called Worry, or the Lord of Worry. So a lot of times when we have stuff going through the first degrees of Taurus, we may be trying to prevent something bad from happening, right? We may be trying to plan and forestall future troubles through, plowing the fields of our life. Like Austin Coppock in his book 36 Faces talks about the plow. Like, this is a time to break up the soil, to get it prepared for fertility, for planting, for sowing, which I think we see in the second decan of Taurus. And then we have this very fertile decan here, okay, where it's associated with charity, but also with sowing and planting and a steady rhythm where, if you learn how to garden, you realize very quickly that you have to work with Mother Nature. You can't force it. You can't overplant your fields, or you will create less fertility than if you actually space things out correctly. You can't overwater, or you'll drown something and create rot. You can't neglect it, or your plant will die as well. So you have to just do the right amount for the right time. T. Susan Chang calls that the Kairos moment, in association with this decan as well. Kairos being the right opportunity at the right opportune moment. And then we're moving to the Seven of Pentacles here, where we're seeing a figure that is thinking about the harvest and thinking about, have I done all the work that is necessary? How is this going to turn out? Maybe examining those crops for any signs of bugs or pests or pestilence. That decan is a difficult decan that's associated with forces beyond our control, like natural disasters and things of that nature. But I think that one of the main themes that I'm gathering from some of my research as I prepare for my decans of Taurus is that decan is about maybe looking back and assessing how successful or unsuccessful we've been with our efforts so far. So, one thing that is really standing out to me as I get deeper into my decanic explorations is those middle cards really are the idealized version of the sign itself. So we are trying to create this steady rhythm here in Taurus. We're trying to create fertility. We're trying to be generous with our resources rather than maybe holding on out of fear and maybe being a little bit too tight-fisted because we're afraid we're not going to have enough in the beginning, or where we're lamenting maybe, I don't know, trying to fight off the forces of nature and maybe trying to move too quickly sometimes too, because there's a story that I'll get to of the Litai in 8, which translates to ruin and rashness and folly. So this decan is more about learning from our mistakes, I think, on some level, and also having faith in the process. This is going to be important with Venus in Aries as well, is we may want to rush things, especially as we get to that eclipse, right? We're going to feel pressure. And we have to realize that sometimes that pressure is more a feeling than an actual pressure. And if we can differentiate between those thoughts, those feelings, those anxieties, and what we actually have to do in the moment, that can really help us to move forward with grace. Andrea says, I see the Five of Pentacles as a moment where instead of worrying, you seek out shelter and help from benefactors to help your mind be in a space where you can count on someone. Yeah, I like that. I think that there's definitely literature that talks about seeking safe spaces and safe havens around that as well. Again, there's multiple ways to approach each of these decans. Even if a card or a decan looks negative on the surface, there are ways of dealing with that energy gracefully that can set you up for success and for being able to get the most out of it and the best out of it. Sometimes it's through waiting. Sometimes it's through not doing something, which is a really tough lesson to learn, when we want to always do more, go. But that's not always what the time requires. Remco says, rounding up year by going internally just before my birthday sounds like a good time to reflect. Well, definitely. You're in sort of maybe the balsamic phase of your solar year, right? Last quarter balsamic phase. It's a great time to reflect and to consolidate all the wisdom from the previous year to make a new start at your solar return. Andrea says, like having helping wheels on your first bike or a crutch to lean on. Yes, like the training wheels of life, Taurus 1. Dimphy says, you can say that plowing, I do feel my arm muscles of working my small allotment this week, clearing it to start sowing and planting, watering strawberry plants. Love this season. Yeah, so Dimphy, you're experiencing this very literally, which I think is a lot of it. A lot of the significations we see in the tarot, in astrology, especially in the northern hemisphere, a lot of it was based on what people were experiencing in maybe a more agricultural society on some level, where we had to get in touch with these seasons. We had to get in touch with a planting season, in Taurus. We had to get in touch with a composting season, a harvest season, through the fall, through Virgo, Libra, and then Scorpio. Although Virgo would be the last sign of summer, of course. So yes, being able to do what is required of us in this time is important. I've been doing a lot of physical manual labor to prepare this home. We have a painting project that we have to get done before we can move forward to the next part of our endeavor here. And there's a lot of time constraint with it. And so I've been scraping and painting and all these things. I have a lot of endurance for mental labor, like reading and studying, but I think my body, my 41-year-old body is like, oh, you haven't done this type of thing in a while. So it is a really interesting way to go through the grief process, though, doing hard manual labor. There is something meditative about just putting your headphones on and listening to music and just scraping at something and just hacking away at things. There's something beautiful about that too. So let me see, I'm looking in the chat. Henry says the Seven of Pentacles looks like when you didn't take care of your garden, so there's nasty weeds among the good fruit. Absolutely, Henry. There's definitely weeding significations with that, and that's true. If you don't do the work, if you don't show up during maybe that second decan of Taurus, you will have to go back and redo things and pull out some of the things that threaten your harvest. So that's a really great observation. We've got some Croatian happening in the chat too. I have to have my Google Translate to see what Andrea and Maria are saying. Jody is asking, is buying a home overrated? I don't know if it's overrated. You're talking to a Cancer sun with a Taurus moon, so for me, buying a home is the culmination of a long cherished dream. But it's a lot of work. I think that what you will realize if you purchase a home is that there's many, many steps in the process, and each one of them requires quite a learning curve if you haven't done it before. All the ins and outs of the finances, all the ins and outs of learning how to take care of your space, all the new responsibilities of upkeep and things like that. So it's very tiring. There's a lot of timing issues that come in with it to be able to close on time and everything like that. So I just appreciate all of your patience and bearing with me through all of these changes here. I'm still trying to prepare as best I could, but it's in the midst of manual labor and emotional labor. So yeah, it's teaching me about balance for sure. Dimpy says, to be honest, I had to prepare this 60-year-old body with daily yoga since January. Otherwise, I would not have accomplished this. Well, Dimpy, send me your workout routine, because I think that I'm going to need to prepare a little bit better for the responsibilities that I have moving forward. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the journey from Taurus 1, 2, and 3. Now, if we dive deeper into Taurus 2 for a short period of time here, Austin Coppock calls that decan a linga yoni in his first edition of that book. I believe there might be a new name coming for that decan, something about sowing. So I don't remember off the top of my head. I heard a talk from him that there was something like sowing and planting, but a linga yoni is this rock that sort of looks like this, but it's a little bit more phallic shaped. This is my lapis lazuli that I have here. And the many of the themes with this decan talk about the fertilization of the soil. So you've broken up the soil with the plow in the first decan of Taurus, and now you have to fertilize that soil through this rhythmic, almost like lovemaking type of experience. Book T calls it material success. Thoth calls it success. We're dealing with an earth sign here, a fixed earth sign. It is the face of the moon. So, the moon is related to bringing things into being, the material world, bringing things to fruition, but also, eliminating things at a certain point in its cycle as well. But I think in Taurus, it's definitely, we've got the exaltation of the moon. So this decan is really powerful for the moon. This is actually where my moon is in the second decan of Taurus. And one of the secrets of success, I think, if you can call it that, and I've had various levels of failure and success, but when I've been successful, it's when I've taken my time. It's when I have shown up for the work and said, okay, I'm creating this trust between me and whatever I'm doing, whether it's trust of study, practice when I was learning and playing guitar and teaching, writing songs and teaching music. You had to show up. You had to show up on your instrument every day. You had to practice. You had to put the work in. But you couldn't, if you overdid it, your hand would just like cramp up and you wouldn't be able to play the next day. So it's about showing up, doing the work that you need to do, and then letting nature take over the other part of it. There's a balance associated with this. And in this card, you can actually literally see the balance here, the scale. I think it's the balance of work and play, pleasure and labor. Work hard, play hard on some level. And that balance is reflected in the Sephira of this decan, which is called Tiferet, which is related to the sun. There are 3 pillars in the Kabbalistic tree of life, and this Tiferet is right in the middle pillar. So it's about balancing these energies and finding the right rhythm. We do have a fixed star at 14 degrees of Taurus called Menkar, which is the mouth of the whale, which is sort of about maybe being cast about by collective unconscious themes, things of that nature, or being able to tap into that energy as well. So we're also seeing reflected at this period of time is the cross holiday of Beltane, which in Celtic culture was actually considered the beginning of summer. That was interesting. That was coming up in my studies. But these cross holidays are we have Emok, Beltane, Samhain, and then what's the last one that I'm forgetting here? Somebody help me out here. I can't remember. It's the one in Leo season. If you remember what the Leo cross holiday is, put it in the chat. But I think that these are transition points in between and kind of chapter markers, check-ins between solstices, right, and equinoxes. So we're in the in-between phase between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. So this period of growth, this period of increase. Okay. So I'm just going through my notes here. Virtue practiced over time, fertilization, fecundity of the land, procreative unions, working the land and planting, building and sowing. There's a daimon associated with Taurus too, which is called the hore, or translates to the hours, which are reflected of the seasons. So that the hore were able to make the wheels of time spin on some level. I'm going to read to you a quote from Theoi about the hore. It says, the hore were the goddesses of the seasons and the natural portions of time. They presided over the revolutions of the heavenly constellations by which the year was measured, while their 3 sisters, the Morai, were spinning out the web of fate. The Horai also guarded the gates of Olympus and rallied the stars and constellations of heaven. The Horai were particularly honored by farmers who planted and tended their crops in time with the rising and setting of stars, measuring of the passing seasons. All right, so we've got these goddesses that were associated with agriculture, with proper timing, and things of that nature. So that's kind of the energy spirit that's helping with this decan. They're responsible for the regular motion of all things. And again, in the card, we reflect the generosity of, I think, Venus as well, being able to share our bounty, since this is a Venusian sign. So I think that one of the things that you can recognize about this Taurus 2 season is normally we would try to have a steady rhythm, a pace that we could sustain. Because Uranus is there, that may not be the case. And I'm feeling feeling very under the gun with some of the house stuff I'm doing, where I don't get to do just a little bit each day. Like I have to put in, a 10-hour day scraping paint while the weather is holding up. Do you see what I'm saying? And Uranus is messing with our rhythms. And I think that there's wisdom in recognizing that even though we want to have steady routines, there are times where we have to put forth a Herculean effort. And if we want to take on a new level of responsibility or make a change, we have to overcome inertia. Inertia being that force of that 1,000-pound animal, that 1,000-pound bull that doesn't want to move. And we want to stay in our comfort zone. And I think that with Uranus here, we are being shaken out of our comfort zone so that we can create a new rhythm that is more reflective of who we are now rather than who we may have been in the past. So that's something to think about and meditate on. Dimphy is saying, do I notice Demetra George's volume 2 next to you? If so, congrats. Yeah. This is something I was talking about with Shu last time. This is Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, volume 2, which talks about the houses and how to do everything. There's a beautiful picture of Demetra George's smiling face. Such a beautiful picture of her. I'm so happy to see her completing this work and being happy. She's one of my absolute favorite teachers and astrologers. I really love her commitment to scholarship, but also the way that she makes things so digestible and practical. There's all sorts of exercises in these books. I highly recommend picking up this book. It's from Rubedo Press. It is on Amazon now, but if you are able to order it directly from Rubedo Press, I would suggest going that direction. But either way, pick it up and go through the exercises, go through the chapters, because you can really learn a lot about Hellenistic astrology that way and just how all this stuff works. I've been meditating, and tell me in the chat if you'd be into this, but I've been thinking about doing some sort of guided, maybe book club type of thing with this book in particular, where a group of us could get together and, do something where we read a chapter a week. And maybe there'd be a small donation for guiding this group. But I think it would be really nice to read it as a community, almost like a mini class or something. If I were to arrange my own astrology classes, which will probably happen in sometime in the near future, a fundamentals class, Demetra George's books, volume 1 and 2, Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice, would be probably one of the first books that I would recommend as a text. So maybe this could be like a little, I don't know, what's it called? My brain is drawing a blank. Like a little tester for that on some level. So let me know if that's something that it piques your interest out there. Send me some thumbs up if that's something that you want me to do, and I'll have to fit it in somewhere. Because what I like to do as a teacher is going through this information with all of you as a mentor and as a tutor. A lot of the times, me digesting it if I will help you to digest it, and if questions come up, we can discuss it and find the answer as a group. And yes, Henry, Rubedo is a very quality bookbinder, as Henry is pointing out. I want to again acknowledge the amazing work of Aaron Cheek and all the editors there. I believe Lisa Scheim and Chris Brennan were doing some editing as well, and anybody I forgot, but I really want to send my hearty congratulations not only to Demetra George, but also to Aaron Cheek and the quality that he puts out. Really, really a fantastic. Every book is a work of art. Every book is quality, and there's a reason why it takes some time for those to come out, because they're not willing to put something out unless it's gone through that rigorous process, and I applaud them for that. I really respect that. All right, so I think that's the energy of Taurus 2. Let's go through kind of the daily parts of this. Okay. All right. So we're starting off the month May 1st, right? We're coming off of the eclipse here, and Jody is dipping out at work. Take care, Jody. And again, my condolences for you and your mom, and we'll all get through this together. And I hope that through working with all the wonderful animals that you care for, that's helpful and a solace as well. I know I've been hugging my cats extra hard lately, so take care, Jody, and I hope you're having a good day. So we're starting off on May 1st here, coming off the eclipse, right? The first aspect that the moon is going to make after that eclipse is going to be a sextile to Jupiter. That's a technique that I really recommend taking a look at, because you can see what type of energy we might really be experiencing with a particular lunation with the first aspect that it makes after it goes outside of what is called the bond. And that's the 15-degree conjunction with the sun or with the opposition. So so what you do is you add 15 degrees to the sun, and then if there's any planet it's making an aspect to, that might be giving you an inclination as to whether this lunation is going to feel blessed or if it's going to feel a little bit more challenging. And I do think that the sextile with Jupiter in its own domicile with Venus there is actually a really good sign. So again, there's really, really positive things that could come out of this eclipse despite some of the challenges that we've had leading up to it. On the 1st, we're also going to be having Venus making a sextile with Pluto. So we are kind of also being able to harmonize some of the challenges that are coming with being able to unearth anything that was repressed. So it may be helping with the cathartic process, because sometimes when we're taking on new things, new challenges, new goals, new responsibilities, new material routines, we have to let go of the old ones first. And I think Venus making a positive contact to Pluto may be assisting with that. On the 2nd, when we get to May the 2nd, we are going to see Venus moving into Aries. So that's really the big news of May 2nd, is the shifting of dignity from Venus in its exaltation, being co-present with Jupiter, Neptune, and Mars, and now being by herself in Mars's domicile, potentially bringing a glamorization of independence. I think that's the thing we see in the first decan of Aries. Sorry, I'm dropping my water bottle here. Is we want to, thank you so much, Jody, for your super sticker. I really appreciate it. Wherever Venus is, we may be feeling more of an attraction to that energy. And when Venus is moving through Aries, we may feel more attracted to going alone, going solo. We may have a little bit more difficulty coming to a compromise or a consensus, and we may really exalt the ability to say, this is me and this is not, you are not me, right? So it may lead to some tension in both the Taurus and the Libra area of your life, because that is what Venus is going to be trying to provide resources for. And Venus won't be able to witness Taurus, but it will witness Libra. So really keep an eye on the Libra area of your life. You may have some interesting conversations about partnership versus independence, especially related to the Libra area of your life. Okay, so that's the 2nd. When we get to May the 3rd, we're going to have a sextile between Jupiter and Pluto. So it's going to mimic that aspect that we just had with Venus, but we're going to be bringing Jupiter significations into the fore. So one thing that you will look for is we're going to be highlighting not only the Pisces area of your chart, but the Sagittarius area of your chart as well. So whenever you see a planet making an aspect like this or perfecting an aspect, always look to the houses that it's in, but also the houses that it's providing for. So the Sagittarian house of your chart will be highlighted, and maybe Jupiter will be assisting eliminating some corruption within that area as well. So that everything that will be different for everyone depending on your rising sign. And again, Demetra George's book is really great for that. I wish I'd had more time to sit with it the last few weeks. I've had the book for about a week and a half. I think I got the book in the mail the day after my mom passed. Like, so I was like, oh, well, this is a nice silver lining, but there's just so much going on. You know, when someone like that passes in your life, you're just talking to a lot of friends and family, and there's just a lot of arrangements that you're trying to work through. And I just really haven't had time to sit down with it as much as I'd like to, even though I got it, you know, about a week before the public did. But now everyone's going to be able to catch up to me, but that's okay. Like, you all still have to read it. And again, maybe we'll be able to do that together. Okay, so we've got this nice Jupiter-Pluto sextile here with some kind of sextiles being of the nature of Venus. So maybe something, some help coming in being able to uncover and renew something in that Capricorn area of our life as well. When we move forward to the 4th, the aspect that's perfecting on the 4th is Mars making a sextile to your Uranus here. So we've got the combination of, you know, the planet of action, the planet of conflict, making a positive aspect to the planet of unexpected change, shakeups. You know, the second decan of Pisces is really related potentially to overestimating your ability. It's like that Sorcerer's Apprentice energy. So I guess my caution with this aspect with Mars Uranus is try not to overestimate your power or your abilities at this point. You can also see that the sun is going to be conjoining Uranus around the same period of time. So the positive parts of that second decan of Pisces is it's sort of like you have an ability to visualize and bring your internal vision into external reality easier than it might be in other decans. But again, try not to overshoot the mark, because it could lead to some unexpected challenges. I'm thinking of the story of Dolus and Prometheus. I'm thinking of the story of Phaethon, who drove the chariot of the sun and couldn't control the chariot. You can hear all of those stories in my Decans of Pisces webinar that is for sale on my website. But yeah, let's see here. Dimphy says, sorry to hear, Spencer. Condolences. I already thought I saw something about you. I will think of you the 30th. Yeah, thank you. Say a little happy birthday to my mom, who's funnily enough, and I'll talk about this more when we get there, her middle name is Eve, and that's what she went by, was Eve instead of her first name. And the first decan of Gemini is related to the apple of Eden, according to Austin Coppock, and biting into maybe Eve and the apple, and the beginning of undifferentiated awareness. And I thought that was an interesting synchronicity that she chose to be called that name and had the sun in that first decan. So I'll get to that in a second, though. All right, so sun conjoining Uranus during this period of time. Again, we've talked about the ability of Uranus to shake us out of our routines. And I think that one of the things that I like to think about with Uranus is that we have, the story that comes up with Uranus is Prometheus. This is something that Richard Harness talks about in his book Cosmos and Psyche. That kind of stealing fire from the gods, but maybe potentially suffering for it. And that's challenging, right? And Andrea is checking out. Thank you, Andrea, for being here today. Good luck with your client, and everybody check out Andrea at Space Tiger Tarot 9 on Instagram. A lot of really good content over there. So take care, my friend. So yes, when we think about Prometheus, we've got this energy of stealing fire from the gods, kind of rebelling against the authority of Zeus, but suffering for it. And so there may be something concerned with that, where we're trying to break the mold, we're trying to move forward with a new knowledge set, but there may be some kind of challenge that we have to go through, sacrifice that we have to make to move forward with it. And we're going to feel that again anytime the sun contacts a planet. It's infusing it with a sense of purpose, a sense of clarity, a sense of awareness. And I feel like that's also true with the outer planets, even though they are not quote unquote visible. I think that it is a beginning of a synodic cycle of some sort. So this may be the very beginning of the seeds that will shift your routines significantly, your daily habits, your the way that you create growth and prosperity in your life. Remember, we talked about that fixed star, 14 degrees of Taurus, Menkar. And this conjunction is happening right on that fixed star. So this may also portend some challenges in the collective. That was the mouth of the whale. But we're not thinking of it as a nice whale. We're thinking of it as a sea monster in the traditional sense. So being swallowed by collective forces that are maybe greater than us and beyond our control is one challenge of this potentially. So I really think that this could be the beginning of some shakeups around our material resources. In America, we're going through periods of inflation. We're going through some challenges with supply chain issues, and people are trying to figure out how to afford everything in their life, and that could be something that we're having to make some significant changes within, especially as we are celebrating our Earth Day today. There may be also some climate changes and some natural, I don't know if it's natural disasters, but there's definitely, well, there is, but there are things that we're going to have to deal with a changing climate as far as how we manage our resources and how we manage our energy efficiency and all of those things as well. So potentially this could be the seed of something like that also. There's been rumblings about currencies. This is something where we might be changing how we deal with our currencies. And one thing that's been coming up for a lot of people with Uranus and Taurus is cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and all those things. Maybe there's something potentially with the stock market or with cryptocurrencies around this period of time to keep your eye on as well. Again, with Mars making that sextile from second decan of Pisces, what I would recommend is I wouldn't liquidate all your savings and buy some kind of risky stock at this point, because you may get a little bit overconfident. So that would be my warning around that is you may be wading into difficult territory if you are too aggressive. And with Venus being in Aries, that's a real possibility. Okay, if we move forward to the 6th, I'm going to keep rolling here. If we move forward to the 6th of May, we do have Venus making a sextile to Mercury here. So you can see Venus at 4 degrees of Aries, sextiling Mercury, which has been fairly newly ingressed into Gemini. So very powerful Mercury, a very somewhat unhappy Venus. So I think that this Mercury in this decan of Gemini, and we'll talk about this as we get to that part of the Decanic show. But the main theme with that is a proliferation of options. And when you have Mercury in the first decan of Gemini, you're splitting pathways. There's a daimon associated with Gemini 1 called Tethys, who was the mother of the rivers and the wife of Oceanus, the ocean or the river that surrounded, that the ancient Greeks thought surrounded the earth. So you can think about all the little tributaries that are splitting off into different rivers and different directions and pathways. And I think that's reflective of Tethys. So there just may be a lot of questions that you're asking, especially about how to create independence within your life. And, the card with Gemini 1 is the 8 of Swords, where we may feel a little paralyzed because we don't, we have so many options that we may be trying to evaluate all of them before we actually take an action. So have the discussions, try to be patient, try not to overthink it, I guess would be my recommendation when you have these types of aspects. Okay, I'm looking at the chat. Henry says, interesting how William Ramsey's work, he cautions against Phaethon's fatal error with respect to astrology. Can you elaborate on that? Well, I'm familiar with William Ramsey through Charles Obert's book on the classical 7 planets. But beyond that, I don't know if I have William Ramsey's work individually, but Phaethon's fatal error is assuming that he could control an uncontrollable force. And I think that if we think about that with astrology, it's really the lesson of hubris. So if we think that just because we have this knowledge or we have some insight into what could potentially happen, we have to come to it with humility and realize that some of these forces are bigger than ourselves, and no matter what we do, we can't control everything. And I'll tell you what, like, that has been really prominent on my mind. There's nothing that will humble you more than death, so realizing that there are just certain things that are out of your control, and that everything has a time, everything has a birth date and an expiration date, and sometimes we can extend that, but other times we can't. So I think that what William Ramsey is referencing is not getting too hubristic about doing this work, not thinking that you have more ability or more, that you can guide every single part of it. Because Phaethon was trying to guide the ship of his father's chariot, which was the sun, which was connected to these wild stallions, these 4 white horses, right? And he just wasn't up to the task. So I think that having faith in the process, surrendering sometimes and submitting, may be the lesson of Phaethon, and not overestimating your ability. I hope that answers your question, Henry. Dimphy says ISY I'm not sure what ISY is, Dimphy. Can you elaborate on that? To check out as well. Time to walk the dog. Okay. Take care, Dimphy. It's good to see you. Hope that you have a good one. And thank you for participating in our community here. I really appreciate you. Thank you, Prudence, for being here as well. It's nice to see you as well, my friend. Okay. So that's sort of the kind of the gist of our Venus-Mercury sextile, a little bit of a minor aspect compared to some of these other ones. We will also see the next day on the 7th, we'll have the sun sextiling Mars. So again, this may be a day to be able to take some well thought out actions, but without trying to overdo things. Again, that's really important when Mars is moving through the 2nd decan of Pisces, is don't get too high on your own supply like Phaethon, right? So that's something to consider as we see the sextile of Mars and the sun. It's an energetic Saturday potentially on May 7th. Yeah, Dimphy says, my ascendant Gemini 2 degrees, so Eve as well. Yeah. So you might resonate with that. If you come back later and watch the Gemini part of the show, you might get some extra insight into your ascendant, Dimphy. We'll get there. I know I'm a little long-winded, but I try to provide value and teach here, as well as just give you the forecasts, because I think that I'm a firm believer in give someone a fish and they'll eat for a day, but teach them how to fish and they'll eat for a lifetime. Henry says, I was personally asking more about the personage Phaethon. Yes, this falls in line with what I thought he was getting at. Good. Okay, I hope that we got the clarity there. Okay. So the last thing that we have with the sun moving through Taurus 2, 2nd decan of Taurus, on the 8th, we are seeing the square between the sun and the moon. So this is the 1st quarter square, and you can see this right here at 18 degrees of Leo. So that is that's our 1st quarter square, our 1st quarter moon, which is a sort of a crisis point between the lunation cycle. So we think of the lunation cycle, if you think about it in the Dane Rudyard way, we're planting a seed. If we have a gardening metaphor, planting the seed at the new moon, and we have a struggle to bring something into fruition. As the moon gains light in the beginning of its cycle, there's all sorts of challenges that we face when we are trying to bring something to its fruition at the full moon. So this might be like it's the halfway point before the full moon, where we may be struggling to bring something into being. And we're trying to kind of, through crisis or conflict, remember, squares are of the nature of Mars, according to the Thema Mundi, and the relationship between Mars and the lights, or the sun in particular. So there may be some kind of challenge between the rhythm that we're trying to establish with the sun in Taurus too, and feeling, I think, acknowledged for the work that we're doing. Leo too is the Six of Wands card, which shows a figure having like a parade here. And I think that there's a desire to be seen with that decan. We have also the victory of authenticity. So when you're creating a new rhythm at this first quarter moon, I think it's very important to be true to yourself and be realistic about what your inner self is like and how it's reflected externally. To me, the definition of integrity, which this card really speaks a lot to, is having a unification of experience between the inner expression and the outer expression. And we may be running into some challenges with what is required of us with these new shooken up routines, and is it really reflective of what we truly desire internally versus what we're required to do externally. I know that for me, like, my long held dream of having my own home is being challenged, I guess, a little bit by the hard manual labor it's taking to get to the finish line, whereas the labor that I prefer is reading books. So you could see, like, that's part of a conflict that could be taking place at this particular square. It's just one example, and that may have a different take for you in your life. But look to the Taurus and Leo areas of your life where there may be something that's a little bit at odds with one another. We've got some nice comments coming in. Prudence appreciates the depths of our talks. Thank you, Prudence. I appreciate you being here. And Remco is also appreciating the time we take. Lynn says, Virgo loves the details. Yes, I have many Virgo placements, so I have to feel like I've given it a thorough treatment. Maria is Google translating just a little regional kind of exchange. Okay. So Maria and Andrea are keeping their secrets. That's all right. That's fine. I love that there are connections being made, not only internationally, but maybe even in your own local communities where you're finding unity with like minds. That warms my Venus and Gemini 11th house heart. Okay, so that's our first quarter moon, and that's really how we're going to end the first section of our talk today, the second decan of Taurus. So let's move forward to the third decan of Taurus and the second part of the show, and I will. We're going to be looking at the time period. You see here between May the 10th and May the 20th, and I'm going to stop my share and just talk about Taurus 3 for a second. So Taurus 3, as we saw earlier, is the Seven of Pentacles, where we have a figure that's leaning on his farming implement, his shovel or his hoe or his rake or whatever he's got there, and he's contemplating the results of his actions. And T. Susan Chang was talking about her father, who was shoveling the driveway with snow and would take on this posture, trying to figure out how much work was left, if he was going to complete the work in the daylight hours. And this may be a period of reflection where we see and we evaluate whether the work that we've done during the earlier parts of Taurus that we've planned for in the beginning and that we've actually started to fructify or bring to fruition in the second decan, whether it was effective or not. Thank you, Maria. Thank you. I appreciate your super chat. I really appreciate that. I love the little kung fu fox that we have here. So those little things are adorable. So again, 20 to 30 degrees of Taurus, or 20 degrees to, the end of Taurus. Austin Coppock calls that decan a string of prayer beads. And I'll explain that in a second. It's a face that's ruled by Saturn. Book T calls it the Lord of Failure, and Book of Thoth calls it success unfulfilled. So they have some themes of like, hey, there might be some things you have to deal with that are out of your control. There may be some challenges in this decan. The daimon, or spirit, is the litai. And I'm going to read to you the litai from theoi.com, their summary. It says that litai were the personified spirits or daimons of prayer, ministers of the god Zeus. They were described as hobbling old women. Their opposite number was 8, the spirit of delusion and folly, in whose wake they followed. Homer describes them as chorai, or maidens of Zeus, rather than the daughters, so it is not clear if they were his literal daughters. So the litai were these old women that were offering up repentant prayers after the rashness of 8. So let's say you've done something with your garden or the project that you're trying to build, whatever it is, and since maybe Venus is in Aries, you rushed through some parts of it, and you did some things, some shortcuts to get something done. This is the time period where the consequences of that action start to become recognized. And you may have to go back and do it again. You may have to say, the repentant part of planting your garden is, let's say you didn't pay attention to it for a week after planting. There may be some weeds that start growing, like we were talking about earlier, and you have to go in and redo that. You have to tend to the garden. It's maintenance. So whenever we start a project, we don't just start it, take care of it, and then forget about it. Sometimes we start it, we take care of it as much as it needs to be taken care of, and then we have to maintain it over time to really bring the harvest to fruition. Now, there's also some significations of forces beyond our control in this third decan of Taurus. Some of that is, I think, associated with 2 fixed stars that are really prominent. At 24 degrees of Taurus, there's a fixed star called Capulus, which is the sword of Perseus. And then a related fixed star is Algol at 26 degrees of Taurus, which is the blinking eye of the severed head of Medusa. And, if you're not familiar with that story, really quick summary is that Medusa was in some parts of the story, or some versions, was raped in, I believe, a temple of Athena or Poseidon, by Poseidon. And this offended one of those goddesses. Like, it's kind of a messed up story, like, because she was actually kind of the victim of a heinous crime, but she was punished for it on some level. There's also a feminized version of it where they were saying Athena maybe gave her the ability to protect herself because of that rape, by being able to turn people to stone with her eyes, and had with her snakes for hair as well. So Algol is not only just a very difficult placement, but it can be very protective if we utilize those energies correctly. Now, I would really caution you, if you're into ritual practice, that it's not something to take lightly. It's a very, very difficult energy to work with. It can be very dangerous if you don't work with it properly. So buyer beware, practitioner be warned. But this is a decan where there are probably natural forces that we have to contend with. Sometimes it's going to rain when you need to paint the deck. So that's what I've been experiencing. I have a deadline for painting certain parts of my house before everything goes through, and it's the rainy season around here. So trying to get a day of sunshine to be able to do it feels very Taurus 3, even though we're not quite there yet. So there may be some forces out of your control that you have to contend with and that you have to accept. And this is where the string of prayer beads comes in. With Saturn, we have everything that could threaten the crops, the awareness of rot, right? Of mold or pestilence, or anything that's eating away that isn't supposed to be there, decay. So the string of prayer beads relates to the litai, offering up prayers and faith and repentance. Oftentimes we start a project and we do what's necessary, and then we have to wait for the outcome. So there's patience associated with this decan as well. Oftentimes, even if you've done everything correctly, there are certain forces that are out of your control. Ask any farmer that sometimes, even though they've gone and done everything possible, that there's insects that can threaten the crops. There's droughts where the rain just wasn't enough and the crop isn't as bountiful. There's too much rain. I remember a few years ago when we were planting tomatoes, there was way too much rain and they got all this root rot and this blight rot on the bottom of it. And there's really not much we could have done about it. Just the ground was too saturated. So it's coming to terms and coming to acceptance of that, and being able to be able to have faith in the process and the things that are, and sometimes atonement, I think, was a word that came up for me with this. Was if we have overly rushed through something, atoning for it is a great way to set it back into balance. And I think the key, mainly the key with this, is learning from your mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has challenges where they didn't quite live up to, whatever was required in that moment, because life happens and life is bigger than us sometimes. And I think the key here is can you learn from those mistakes? Doing Taurus 3 gracefully is really being honest, really being sober about the effort that you've put in. That's the Saturn part of it. And saying, did I really work hard enough, or did I cut corners in this project? And then, being able to own up to it, Saturn style, and restore balance. That's one thing that Saturn does, is it restores balance. It increases that which is lacking and it reduces that which is excessive. It's the planet of Nemesis, and that's what Nemesis, that's what her role was in Greek mythology. Okay, so that's kind of our experience with Taurus 3. Let's look at some of the daily parts of that. Okay, so we're looking at May 10th, and the interesting thing about this is we're starting out with Mercury stationing retrograde on the 10th. So it's stationing retrograde, it's slowing way down and turning backwards to retrace some of its steps, which is really funny because it seems like that also reflects a need to really re-examine some actions that we took recently. So not only are we in a decan where it's important to reevaluate if your work was effective or not, but Mercury is going to be moving backwards as well. So again, Mercury is giving us some testimony that we may have missed the first time. Okay. Remco says, for me, this decan is about making sure preparations are in place. Yeah, I think you can think about it like that. Although I think that the first decan of Taurus is more about planning. I think that this decan is the preparation against failure. It's like preparing, guarding yourself against the worst case scenario. It's the third decan of Taurus, saying, well, this has already happened. How do we pick up the pieces on some level? It's saying, can you slow yourself down enough to prevent the worst case outcome? But yes, I think that there is definitely a little bit of that in there as well. Remco. Henry says, I feel like he can't, so this is the 7 of Pentacles. I feel like he can't hoe for all the weeds. It's like having rocks in your lawn and it being unwise to mow. Yeah, definitely. Because, those rocks may have been there literally for thousands of years. And sometimes you have to have the patience and to get rid of that stuff before you can move forward again, before you can liberate into motion. And remember, this is the decan that precedes Gemini. So precedes the swiftness of Mercury. So maybe there's some heavy boulders in your life that you have to remove before you have freedom of movement again. So I like that. I like that, Henry. EK says, weeds are so much about perception. Yes, that's a great meditation as well. EK says, that was yesterday for me, preparation and perfection of things out of my control. I have to watch for this lunation. Yeah, so sometimes that's a great meditation, Beth, because I think that sometimes what seems like a challenge, what seems like something that's threatening our fertility, actually can have some benefits of its own if we look at it from a new perspective. So think about those things in your life, that things that seem to slow you down may actually be protecting you on some level as well. Or things that seem to be malefic, like algal, right? Like the head of Medusa, can actually be one of the more powerful protections that you can have if you utilize it wisely. So a great observation. Remco says, doing the best you can to have the condition in place that corn can grow, corn can grow beyond the things that are out of your control. Yes, coming to terms with those things. And Henry says, Saturn, you were supposed to bring balance to the force. Yeah, I love that. You were supposed to be the chosen one. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that seems to reflect Anakin Skywalker's journey on some level. I always thought of him as a Capricorn archetype. I know a lot of people like, oh, he's kind of scorpionic, but the fact that James Earl Jones, one of a Capricorn, was his voice and his gravitas, really seems to reflect some of that as well. Like holding on too tightly to material reality and then becoming this authoritative, strong arm who wants to control everything, but maybe also creating decay within it. There's a lot of different ways we can think about that. I'm really curious to see how they treat that in that new upcoming Obi-Wan show on Disney Plus, where Darth Vader will be making a return. I'm excited for that. Okay, so we have Mercury stationing retrograde and simultaneously coming within 15 degrees of the sun, going under the sun's beams. So I alluded to this earlier, but we can see Mercury being in its psychopomp phase. When it goes under the beams, it's invisible. It's going into the underworld, guiding the souls of the deceased to the underworld, into the land of Hades. So we may have to go back into the depths of our unconscious, maybe the depths of our past, maybe into the depths of our inner worlds to uncover some realizations. And we may have some really, really powerful insights when the Cazimi happens at 0 degrees of Gemini later in the month on the 21st. Mercury will be stationing retrograde all the way until the 3rd of June, where it will turn direct at the exact degree of the sun at the eclipse on the 16th. So it'll turn direct at 26 degrees of Taurus, which is algal. So there's a lot of algal stuff going on this month. So again, I would say that look at the conversations that you're having with people. Make sure that you're trying to protect against the worst case scenarios if you can, but also make sure that you're keeping your groundedness, that you aren't allowing anger or rage to create havoc in your life. That's one of the downsides of algal, is if it is an unrestrained force, it can create a lot of destruction. Remember, we talked about it being piled up corpses. It's important for you not to pile up corpses in your own life through not being able to direct that energy. I think this is great work for deep trauma work, where being able to release some of those pent up emotions, but hopefully within a safe space that will allow you to utilize it effectively and with clarity, rather than having it control you. I think that's the key with trauma work, is when we bring clarity to it and we start to make friends with it or accept it, rather than having it operating beneath the surface and creating all sorts of challenges because of our ananke, or our unawareness of it, our ignorance, right? Okay. Okay, yes, crops, yes. So the other thing that's happening on the 10th is going to be a big day. That's a turning point. They also call, when Mercury is stationing retrograde or direct, a moment of phasis, an omen that's speaking very loudly. So there's going to be messages that we're receiving that are important around this, and they might actually be messages regarding things that we need to redo, and maybe potentially some mistakes that we made, which is okay. Forgive yourself for it and just deal with it as it comes. The other thing is happening is Jupiter is going to be leaving its domicile of Pisces and moving into the house of Mars, Aries. So a real big shift in the sky. We've had this really quick period of Jupiter and Pisces just screaming through Pisces for the last few months. Usually Jupiter stays in a sign for about a year, but we only got a few months of it with Jupiter and Pisces because it's in the part of its synodic cycle where it's moving very quickly. But it's joining again. It's coming together with Venus again, or at least co-present in the same sign. I look at Jupiter as the type of actions that we take that will bring honor and merit. And in Aries, this may expand or accentuate the necessity of going it alone, of differentiating ourselves and creating sovereignty. We may be honored for our ability to be independent and to take action towards our own abilities, right? When utilizing our own abilities. It probably will lessen the kind of empathy that we see with Jupiter and Venus and Pisces, the emotional empathy, and it's more about action. So things are probably going to start happening around this period of time, if they haven't already. Again, though, there's astrology is never cut and dry. While we may feel a little bit anxious to get rolling with these two planets, Mercury is saying, hey, better reconsider some things. And the sun is also saying, slow down, work with nature rather than trying to swim upstream or work against it. Okay, so that's the 10th. On the 13th, the sun is going to be conjoining the North Node. So here we have the conjunction of the sun and the North Node, which is increasing some of the significations of the sun. So again, if we try to combine Taurus 3 significations and awareness of what may have gone wrong, the North Node may be increasing those things. It may be, increasing our desire to be an authority figure in our life as well. So we may see an increase in our authority, but also have a necessity to take care of some of the larger factors that we couldn't control in the past as well. So this may be a damage control type of aspect as well. And we can see that the sun is moving closer and closer to a trine with Pluto in Capricorn as well. So we're able to take on some of the responsibilities of eliminating corruption in our material systems. This is also the beginning of an application to a square with Saturn. So if we take all this in a big picture thing, you can see that over the next few days from May 12th to about May 15th, the sun and Saturn are going to be applying to a square, or the sun is applying to a square to Saturn. I think that this is how I've been meditating on this aspect. First of all, when it perfects, the sun will be on that fixed star Capulus, the sword of Perseus, which is very young, it's very rash, it's the sword of Perseus. So we may be feeling very restless, but Saturn is in the overcoming position. It is earlier in zodiacal order, and it is exerting its influence on the sun. It's saying, hey, sun, you've got to play by my rules here. And the Saturn always slows everything down. So there may be some frustrations in leaving the past behind. I think that Saturn in the last decade of Aquarius is saying, you're frustrated. It is your duty to untie those things that are keeping you from moving on in your life. And they may be idealistic glass ceiling types of things, like mental limitations, where the narrative that we are accepting is not allowing us to move forward with our life. So what I want you to do at this Sun-Saturn square is I want you to be realistic about your material efforts over the previous month. And I also want you to, number one, be gentle with yourself and try not to beat yourself up mentally about it, but also recognize that some of the limits that are coming through may be more idealistic than real. Okay. I think another manifestation of this is that there may be social issues that are slowing the pace of things down as well. When Saturn's in Aquarius, there are forces that are bigger than us, that are collective, idealistic forces that are creating challenges as well. So this may be something in the news or in the collective that is making it very difficult, that is combining with a decan that is about natural disasters, that's about forces that are out of our control. I would say this is a time where you slow down, you say your prayers, you accept the things that you can do and that that you can't do, that you can't control, and then you do the things that are within a certain set of boundaries. Okay. There probably will be some limitations that arise with this Sun-Saturn square, and that might feel oppressive, it might feel depressing, but it's going to pass. And once it passes, the Sun will move into a trine with Saturn in Gemini season. So this may be a difficult time, but it will be temporary. And I think that that's something always to keep in mind with the more difficult transits. So that's the time frame between the 12th and the 15th. Susanna is stopping in from Finland. Hello, Susanna. We've just been talking Taurus decans and eclipses and all sorts of changes. I know that you've been going through some challenges with the loss of a beloved pet as well, and I send my condolences to you. And I think that that's one of the hardest things we can deal with as well. Like I lost one of my cats a few years ago, and it was gut wrenching, because if you're a Cancer like Susanna and I are, those are our little fur babies and our little fur children. And sometimes you spend more time with them than you do the other members of your family. And their love is so unconditional and they're so pure. It can be challenging. So my heart is with you, Susanna, as you heal from that as well. And I really love the beautiful little box that you had for your little fur baby. So sending you love as well. All right. The other thing that is potentially helping over this course of time, maybe helping, I say that with trepidation, because I'm always leery of this planet. I think that this planet is a malefic planet, despite all the airy-fairy stuff regarding it. There's going to be a sextile between the Sun and Neptune. My experience of Neptune, well, I had a face full of Neptune the last few weeks with the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction happening when my mom passed. It has a dual action. It is a dissolving action. It sometimes will remove things through just having them kind of, what was solid is no longer. And it's removing the boundaries between people, between things. A lot of the research I've been doing with mundane transits talks a lot about it being a very socialistic planet, where the boundaries between people and their resources is dissolving as well, where it's more of a collective action. Schmidt would call Neptune a collective moon, like universal substance, where everything's just returning back to the melting pot, I guess, to be redistributed on some level. My personal experience of Neptune is I just feel really like melty. I feel tired. This may be a time where we're feeling a little worn out. Yes, you may have an awareness of this transcendent reality. I think that the flip side of that, of those boundaries being, the veil being thin between each other and the life and death and all of that, it can lead to some really beautiful connections and beautiful experiences. But it's definitely a mixture of energy. It's not just this like idealism planet. It definitely requires some bloodletting on some level. So there will be a sextile between the sun and Neptune on the 14th or 15th, is when it will perfect. Okay, and this is all leading up, all of this magic is leading up to our second eclipse of the season. So we have here the full moon, lunar eclipse in Scorpio. So let's talk about that. And I'm going to have guests on for this in time. But we have an opposition between the sun and the moon at a full moon lunar eclipse. We have the moon, in this case, conjoining the south node, K2, where we may be processing something, releasing something important. I will warn you, in addition to the sun and the moon being in places that are a little bit fraught with peril, we also have this Saturn Square, okay? And this is a giant T-square in the sky, right? This is a giant, like, we're going to be pulled in a lot of different directions around the middle of May. Remember we've talked about this, the third decan of Taurus. We have the sun very close to Algol at this point. So we may be dealing with some things out of our control that are bigger than us. Saturn is in a place where there may be some limiting social constructs or limiting social beliefs, or even our own intellectual beliefs could be creating some challenges. And then the moon, the poor moon in this lunation, is going to be in her fall in the third decan of Scorpio. In the third decan of Scorpio, we've got the Seven of Cups card. And here we see a figure that is trying to work their way through a number of different offerings or illusions, potentially. Some people associate this with the seven deadly sins. I like to think about this as the Scorpio is, it's Mars, right? And in Aries, Mars is trying to sever and separate from the collective to infuse into an individual point of consciousness and to come to power. And in Scorpio, we're severing and separating to return that body to the earth and return consciousness to the collective. We're also seeing a place where Mars does not necessarily want to give up the ghost. There's conflict that comes when we're trying to individuate, when we have to separate from like the parent plant or whatever, the collective. But there's also a defending mechanism with Scorpio where we're saying we realize that the life force is dying, but we're going to do anything in our power to hang on to that form that may be losing vitality. And in the third decan of Scorpio, we really see some of the debauchery. That's the name of the card, debauchery, the Lord of debauchery, that can happen when we're trying to hang on to old forms. Think about this like a vampire, or like like Frankenstein, where we're trying to reanimate something that has passed on. And when we hang on too tightly to old forms, man, we can do all sorts of evil. So I think that the key with this, the way to do Scorpio 3 gracefully is saying, hey, you know what? This has outlived its efficacy. This form has outlived its time. It's time to let go of it. And by doing that, you are liberating that energy to find a new goal, a new form. The transition from Scorpio to Sagittarius is, the liberation. Look at the next card after the Seven of Cups. It's the Eight of Wands. It's speed. It's like saying, oh my God, all the spirit is liberated. Where are we going next? We're enthusiastic and excited about where we could be heading, right? And if you hang on to the old form, you're just trapping it. And you're trapping it in something that can't possibly provide life anymore. So I think that this eclipse is about letting go of the old form to truly commit to the new start that we made at the Taurus new moon eclipse, because that new moon eclipse is going to be really, really powerful for growth. But if we are hanging on to the past through our own mental limitations, through our own hanging on to old routines, old physical forms, it's really going to slow down the process, and it may the harvest may be corrupted if we are trying to simultaneously make a new start and hang on to the old at the same time. So I think that this is really what we're looking at with this eclipse. Again, with K2, energy is going out. Let it go. Let it go. Okay? Because if you hang on, you may create those piled up corpses that Algol is talking about. You may create collateral damage that doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You may have some really intense exchanges about, the letting go process around this time. And it may not be fun, but it will be liberating if you deal with it. Susanna says, your cats were named by the Lord of the Rings, like mine too. So I know you're a soulmate. Yeah, Susanna and I have the sun at the exact same degree, 15 degrees of Cancer. And my cats are Gandalf and Radagast. And you have to remind me what the names of your cats are, Susanna. Which characters they're reflecting. Is it like Frodo and Bilbo or something? But yes, great minds think alike. Wizard cats, magical creatures. Okay, so that's the eclipse that we're seeing on the 16th. It's also, there is some help that we'll receive at this eclipse. We do have that opposition and we have that square from Saturn, but there is a trine. The moon will be trined Mars and Neptune. So, potentially we may have to make sacrifices. The third decan of Pisces is about what are you willing to give up to bring the dream into fruition. And you may have to dissolve something, okay, with Neptune there as well, to get the most out of this. And just let it go, just let it dissolve. The cycles will continue. Life does go on, and with every birth, with every death, there is a birth or the seed of a birth, and with every birth that you're planting the seed of a death. So it's continual, it's eternal, it's a dance. So, put on your shoes and dance with it rather than sitting on the sideline. Okay, so that's our eclipse on the 16th. On the 18th. Let's see here. On the 18th of May, that's when we have the Mars-Neptune perfection. The moon will also be out of bounds on the 18th to the 20th. Remember, we talked about that in the beginning. So again, whenever Neptune touches a planet, it's going to kind of dissolve the energies of that planet. And Mars generally represents drive, action, severance. Forgive yourself if you're feeling a little bit of fatigue around this period of time. We probably have gone through a really emotional full moon eclipse. We may not really feel like doing anything. That's sort of the main vibe I'm getting with this. It's okay to rest. I think that this is a period of saying, you know what, if I want to just chill out and rest and reflect, that's okay to allow yourself to do that. And you don't have to force things around this period of time. Mars in Pisces really does say, hey, find meaning in what you're doing first. You don't have to force the action. Sometimes an indirect path is the best way to go around this period of time, because we will be preparing after this Mars-Neptune conjunction for Mars to move into Aries, okay? So, which is very action-orientated. There will be a time for movement, for individuation, but allow yourself the reflective time to know your why before everything starts moving once again. Okay, on the 19th, then we're also seeing in that period of time, through the 18th through, from the end of the eclipse really to the 19th, the sun's going to be applying to that trine with Pluto. Another significant symbol for letting go, for eliminating corruption, for embracing change and achemical change. I like how Schmidt calls Pluto a transcendental Mercury. So having the right achemical mixture, stirring the drink, creating a mix of elements, I think is definitely what Pluto does on a grand scale. So we may have an awareness of what we need to do to move forward in that regard. Oh, Susanna says, my cats were Strider and Precious. Oh, those are great names. Aragorn, Strider, and the Precious. Precious. I saw a meme the other day that my friend, another fellow Lord of the Rings fan, sent me with Gollum with an inner tube going up to like on a water slide. I don't remember what it said in it, but I told him, it's like, wow, he really thinks that inner tube is something quite precious. So it was funny. Yeah, he was holding the ring. I'll have to look it up and find it for all of you and send it to you. So, the 19th, a confrontation with the power structures in our life, taking on the mantle of new responsibility. I think that might be something where we are letting go of an old narrative, of maybe an old victimhood as well. A lot of the times we don't take responsibility just because we've been told that we can't do it or that we aren't capable of it. And as we let go of those narratives with Saturn moving through Aquarius, hopefully, we'll be able to take on the new mantle of responsibility. And a Sun-Pluto trine may require us to take up that responsibility and do it with grace. The other thing that's happening on this day is the retrograding Mercury will be sextiling Jupiter. So maybe there is some fruitful conversations that Mercury is having with Jupiter and reviewing the way that we are exerting power and the way that we are individuating. We're seeing all the options we have for crafting our own path and our trailblazing pioneering path. So again, you don't necessarily have to do it all at once. We're just coming off the eclipse. We're seeing lots of things were revealed. Now we're finding our why with Mars moving through the final degrees of Pisces. We're getting ready to take action when Mars moves into Aries. Okay, so that is what we have for the third decan of Taurus. Some other notes I just wanted to give you before we move on from that is that, T. Susan Chang has a lot of great little tidbits in her books. She was talking about this card here, the Seven of Pentacles, as being reflected of the potato famines of the 1840s and the blight that came, which is very Saturnian, things caving in on themselves, right? Rot, that may reflect some of the challenges of that card, forces out of our control. She talks a lot about weeding the garden, doing the chores and scrutinizing things for flaws and redoing and remedying things that were rashly done. And just having endurance. I think that's another thing. Just to get through that period of time, you may have to endure some challenges. And just through your patience, through your faith and patience, you'll get through that period of time. Harrison is excited to be letting go. Yeah, sometimes letting go of the things that have been burdens for a long time is really, really powerful, and it can bring us new vitality. All right, so here is the last part. Let's see if you guys doing all right out there, everyone? Folks doing fine? Like we're hitting the 2-hour mark here. So let's see. Yeah, we'll probably go another maybe 20 minutes here just because that's how I roll. Welcome to Gemini season here, the May 20th through May 31st. We're going to see the sun in the first decan of Gemini leaving Taurus into the home of Hermes. And we start off the month with Mercury in retrograde motion, coming into alignment with its inferior conjunction with the sun. So this decan, we see the the Eight of Swords, with a figure that's blindfolded and bound, surrounded by swords. The bounds are loosely tied potentially, so it may be some mental limitations that we're dealing with, similar to the Seven of Swords card. But the key is that these swords, they may be able to cut these bonds if we just kind of shift perspective a little bit. The way that I look at Gemini is different than many people. I really find a lot of truth in the Thema Mundi, the metaphorical natal chart of the world. And Gemini is on the 12th house cusp. And it makes an enormous amount of sense to me, thinking about the 12th house as being the time before birth. They talk about that as being labor pains and the time when a soul is in, before it infuses into the body at the ascendant, right? And if you think about that, and being a 12th house sun and Mercury, this really resonates with me. There is a lot of review that goes on, a lot of self-doubt about weighing all of the different possibilities before taking an action. This is one of my real challenges in life, is I tend to overthink things and every single possibility before taking an action. It was really bad when I was a kid. Like for example, my dad would take me to a store to pick out either some shoes or some pants, and I refused to commit to any of them. My poor Pisces dad enabled this behavior. But I'd have to go to like 8 different stores because I needed to know what every single option was before I could settle on something. And this type of thing has followed me into my adulthood. When I'm trying to, make a major purchase or anything like that, I have to explore every single option. It's getting a little better with time because I just don't have time to do all that research. But this is kind of it's reflective of the myth of which is a Greek story that I believe comes from Platonic philosophy, where the soul is offered different lots in life before incarnating into a body. And they have to choose from the lots that they are offered. And with knowledge of all the pros and cons, all the ups and downs, the tragedies and triumphs of that life that they're picking. And imagine the indecision that you would have knowing all the suffering that you might have to endure. And I think that this really reflects the paralysis that many authors talk about with Gemini 1. And I think it comes from the pre-birth moment and needing to touch every pathway and to see all of the ramifications of everything. It's not that Gemini is fickle, it's that Gemini is really needing to explore, like Hermes, and say, and like Tethys, the daimon associated with this decan, who was the mother of rivers. So think about like this great river that's surrounding the earth, and then all the little tributaries that are going off in little directions that are fertilizing the land, all the explorations that water can take. And I think that you'll start to hear or feel some of the truths in this decan. Now, here's another really interesting thing. So Austin Coppock calls this the apple of Eden. And I was talking about earlier that this is my mom's solar decan. And her middle name was Evelyn or Eve. And she didn't like her birth name, Pamela. And she chose to be called Eve. And I thought it's really reflective, seeing the synchronicity of choosing a name that is so reflective of her solar decan, and the biting into that apple and immediately being thrust into a world of duality and of being able to see all of these polarities. Okay, and this is where we may be thrust into a world of duality, polarity, where we have this unified thing, and then this explosion of options happens, and we're exploring. We become explorers. Now, I'll if you'll indulge me, I'll share some memories of my mom that may reflect Gemini 1. My mom was a very enthusiastic person. She loved to learn. She was a preschool teacher, and she was very much in motion, great gardener, but she was a reader, and she would get not one book, but 10 books from the library and read all of them very quickly in the course of a week, and then go get 10 more, and myriad of subjects. This, I think, this love of reading and this behavior of getting 10 books at a time, you can see reflected in the stacks that I have near me, and the garbage bags of books that my daughter brings home from the library regularly. I think she fostered that love of reading in both of us. And just all the little factoids and things like that. It's really just she reflected this decking quite well. But there was also a restlessness, I think, in her spirit and her heart. Like, there was a lot of changes that she made when she was a young woman, feeling this restlessness and wanting to explore a lot of different pathways that were somewhat of a challenge between the two of us. Eventually, that need for change manifested in like remodeling a home over and over and over again. Like, she was able to settle and then utilize that energy to make those changes and for variety and for bringing like kitsch into her life while also staying grounded. And I think that there's a great lesson in that, because we eventually do have to kind of find where our roots are and where our foundations are. And there are ways to bring in that variety, that exploration, that nuance, those different tributaries, while not necessarily needing to blow up every part of your life. And, there's a lot of wisdom in that. And this face, first decan of Gemini, is ruled by Jupiter. And one of the really fascinating connections that I was making as I was reading about in the various sources, so we have Jupiter in Gemini. Like, so think about this: Jupiter in Gemini is in its exile, whereas its opposite decan, the Eight of Wands, is Mercury in Jupiter's sign in its exile. So we're having an explosion of doubt, of options, of directions. I think that Mercury is a planet that asks questions. It's cast doubt. It's skepticism. It's saying, I have a million questions, rather than the certainty and the unity of order that Jupiter would generally thrive under. Jupiter is a planet that connects things and creates order and peace, whereas Mercury throws them into doubt. So that's really another thing to meditate on with that is, an explosion of options with Jupiter ruling this face. Book T calls it the Lord of Interference. I believe there's also something regarding shortened force. So this is we have to kind of do the explorations, reconcile those different pathways in the second decan of Gemini, and then eventually make a choice. This is what people don't really get about Gemini, is that the completion of that energy is sacrificing one of the twins so that the other thing that is most important to you can live and can be infused into a body like Cancer and can be gestated and can be brought to fruition. So for all of the Gemini energy out there, explore, reconcile the dualities, and then eventually make a choice, because it's hard to keep all the plates spinning and do everything well. I think it's sometimes you do have to make a commitment, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes there's freedom in the limitations that we impose, or working within limits and the structures. So we'll feel a splitting of our attention around this period of time, an exploration of possibilities, of questions. One thing I like about T. Susan Chang is she gives us a little bit of a remedy for this card, the Eight of Swords. And she says the remedy comes from the other eights, where the Eight of Wands means that if you wait a little bit, change will happen. Change will come to you, right? That card is 8 wands flying in a direction, like moving really quickly through the air. She also says that you could look at the Eight of Pentacles, where it shows a craftsman getting to work. It says, get busy. You feel confused, just do some work, and then in the Eight of Cups, if you're, walking away, sometimes if there's too many possibilities, you walk away from one and choose the one that is important to you. And then finally, the gift of this card potentially could be, like the Four of Swords, quieting the mind, collecting your thoughts so that you're not overwhelmed by all the different possibilities that you have. And you can quiet that, I guess you could call it the monkey mind, a little bit through things like meditation, through getting it out of your brain, through journaling, through writing, all of those things. So I think that that's the way to deal with that. Dimpy is back. Hello, Dimpy. Trippy Hippie is giving us the evil eye there, or the protection eye. 222 brought me here. All right. Well, the angels are speaking to you today, Trippy Hippie. Welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us today on Earth Day 2022. Okay. So that I think, any questions with that? Because I think that that's sort of an exploration of Gemini 1. The cards for Gemini are difficult, and I think that Gemini is very misunderstood, especially in modern astrology. Everyone thinks that they're fickle or children or something like that. These are all the cliches. And if you bring in that 12th house thema mundi, and you bring in the pressure of choosing your lots in life, I think it brings a lot of clarity to maybe what a Gemini type of energy person is going through, and the anxiety that could produce, and the need to work through some of that. Okay, so let's go through some of these transits. Here's our chart again. We're looking at May the 20th, where the sun is going to be moving into Gemini, the 20th, and into the 21st here. Immediately, we have the Gemini sun making a conjunction with Mercury, its host. So that's called the inferior conjunction, or the cazimi, Mercury being in the heart of the sun, meeting with its host, which is really powerful. It's pretty cool to have a cazimi in that sign. I think that you're going to see an amazing awareness of all the different pathways that you could choose. It may feel a little overwhelming. It is good to be curious around this period of time. It's good to explore and be flexible, because when we explore different pathways and we release maybe some of the fixed energy of Taurus, sometimes we can do things way faster or way more efficiently than we could do in the past. I mean, think about Gemini also as like the bees that are pollinating all the flowers. You got to visit some flowers to collect all the pollen that you need to create honey. But the end goal is to create honey. It's not just the collection of the pollen. It's not, every flower is the end goal. There is actually unity within that. You're bringing that pollen back to the hive to create something that can be nourishing. It's a transition point to the solstice, right? It is ambitious, right? The sun is still climbing in the sky. This is something that my nightlight astrology, Achutabhava teacher taught me, was the ambition of Gemini, where it's still moving forward and rising. But when it gets to the solstice point, the sun switches directions. So this may be part of the Gemini story as well, is you get to the end point and then you're like, I guess I got to go a different direction now, right? That may be where we get some of the fickleness. Yeah. So we are blowing Trippy Hippie's mind. All right, good. I love that. Like, significant date here. Remco says, so relate to this myth of love your hermit's lamp that illuminates that. Yeah, that was a big aha light bulb for me too, connecting those, and the 12th house and the myth of with Gemini. That feels like truth to me. So I feel you. Henry says, I definitely hear you on all that with Gemini, MC and Sun and Mercury in the 12th. Okay, so we got some more confirmation of that. Tanya Gerardo says, you're describing Gemini perfect. 0 degrees Gemini rising here. Thank you for your insight. Well, see, we're getting some great feedback with that. I love hearing when people are making that connection, and when we can help you to figure out what's going on in your life. Because I think that, I'll tell you, there's not a more maligned sign in modern pop astrology than Gemini. People just take a hot dump on that sign all the time, and I think it's unfair. I think that it can be the necessity to explore can be frustrating for people that are less flexible. But when we understand what the end goal is, it can really help us to navigate all those waters gracefully. Okay, so we've got this inferior conjunction, the retrograde conjunction, where Mercury is moving pretty slow around this period of time. So this might be a time to slow your thoughts down. Yes, explore, but don't get overwhelmed by all the explorations, because that could lead to some challenging, anxious, sleepless nights potentially. The next thing we have moving forward here is we have the quarter moon. So this is the last quarter moon. Okay, let's see, the 22nd. Where is that? Yeah, should be. Maybe I had my dates a little off. No, I didn't. Just the moon moves quickly. So here is the last quarter moon at 1 degree of Pisces, squaring the 1 degree Gemini sun. There we go. On the 22nd, in the afternoon on the 22nd. Let me get a drink of water here. All right. So what are we dealing with here? Remember, we have crisis points at the squares because they're of the nature of Mars, some kind of conflict. At the first quarter moon, Rudyard describes it as a crisis of materiality, bringing something into being. At the last quarter moon, he describes it as a crisis of consciousness, where we're trying to let go of something, where we're shifting our mindset to be able to consolidate the seed of wisdom and of knowledge, and then finally prepare for the new start moving forward. So here, the sun is bringing an awareness on all the different pathways we could take externally, for maybe increasing our sociability as well, and being out in the world and exploring like those little bees to all those little flowers. And the moon in Pisces one is, encouraging us to go on an internal journey and to find meaning within it rather than to cast doubt. Jupiter is saying, I know, whereas Gemini is like, what is this, right? Like, it's saying, what does that mean? Like, what is this? Like, it's a question versus an answer type of thing. And that's a little bit too simplified, but I do think we could be feeling a tension between wanting to go on an internal journey to find our sense of authenticity versus all of the different directions that life may be pulling us, and explorations that we might want to take externally as well, mentally versus emotionally. So give yourself some space to maybe take a time out. If you're feeling like you have a lot of social obligations around this time, this period with the last quarter moon might be a good time to figure out which of these social contacts is most important. How can you do it safely? I would still encourage everyone to be very careful out there. We're at a time period where everybody's really exhausted with things like COVID and whatever, and I still think we're not quite out of the woods yet, and I think that we're trying to figure out how to reintegrate, but there's still some challenges with that, and I think that it's okay to take your time if you're still working through some of that. So that's the 22nd. There's another event happening on this day. You can see that Mercury, after its cazimi with the sun, is immediately backing up into Taurus. So, we're going to have some realizations about our options, but we may have to go back and take care of some things that we maybe didn't do correctly the first time. We have to learn from some of our mistakes, take care of some maybe material things that we may have failed at in the beginning of this cycle. So reviewing what worked and what didn't. How can you protect your harvest, right? How can you protect what you've planted, your crops? And maybe asking some real questions on how to deal with some natural forces that were out of your control the first time around. We also have a supportive sextile of Mars and Pluto on this day as well. So you can see that we've got Mars, rooting out the sources of corruption and helping us to root out those sources of corruption potentially by making contact with Pluto in the last degrees of Capricorn. All right. Let's move to the 23rd. Almost done. We're heading around the bend here. Thank you so much for everyone who's hung out with me today on this Friday. I hope that you're all doing well on Earth Day. I hope that you're able to get outside a little bit. Like, maybe take me on your podcast if you have a good internet connection somewhere and sit underneath a tree and get some sun on your face or something like that. Or if you're outside now and you're listening later, good for you. So we're seeing a few sextiles on the 23rd. The sun will be sextiling Jupiter on the 23rd, which should feel like a nice aspect potentially, where we're able to individuate, take some actions through our explorations that lead to a greater sense of independence and sovereignty. The sun will be conjoined the fixed star Mirfac at 2 degrees of Gemini, which is also in the constellation of Perseus. It's the right side of Perseus. So again, some yang energy at play. It's a very action-orientated fixed star. So that combined with Jupiter, it could be maybe a busy day. And Mars will be sextiling that Mercury retrograde as well in Taurus. So potentially some fruitful conversations, some great ideas maybe about how to move forward right before Mars moves into Aries. So we got to tie up some loose ends on the 23rd before we take that big action. So it's a good day for planning, plan things out. And then on the 24th, bam, Mars is moving into Aries. It's in its own domicile. It's diurnal domicile. It's applying to a 3-degree conjunction with Jupiter. So we may be really wanting to take a big action. I guess I would try not to get over enthusiastic about it, but there's a lot of raw yang force. Austin Coppock calls that deck in the axe. So a lot of times the energy we're putting forth, I talked about this in my Aries Decans webinars, there might be collateral damage. It's just kind of swinging wildly. So be careful not to swing too wildly. We may have a little bit of help on that day from the sextile of Venus and Saturn. So there may be some sobriety that comes into play here a little bit, helping us. Venus will be in her own face, her own decan, in the 3rd decan of Aries. So there is a little bit of charisma and sex appeal, I guess, with Venus in this decan. But it may be married with some practicality, making some contact with Saturn. So this is a good time to utilize your charisma to win over maybe a hostile crowd, utilizing your sense of humor, utilizing your social grace, and to be able to also be realistic though. So marry that charisma with a sense of realism, and I think you'll be able to navigate this day correctly. On the 25th of May, we will have a trine between retrograde Mercury and Pluto. So again, we experienced this aspect on the 28th when those planets were direct and Pluto was just starting to turn retrograde. So look back on the 28th of April. We haven't quite gotten there yet as of this recording, but figure out what's going on there. There may be themes that are coming up once again about, ideas to be able to unearth things that we've repressed and deal with them in a unique and innovative way, potentially, reviewing some of the systems, material systems that we have in our life. As we move forward to the 27th, we are going to have a square. This is one of the difficult aspects of the end of the month. There's going to be a square between Venus and Pluto. So you can see here that we may run into some challenges when we're trying to win someone over. I would highly recommend trying to avoid getting into some kind of power struggle. Yes, you can try to convince someone of your point of view, but there's limitations to how far you should go with that. I would stop short of manipulating someone or trying to utilize nefarious or underhanded methodology to get what you want. That could be a temptation with this Venus Pluto square. And we may have just some conflict between, you and maybe some of the bureaucratic systems in your life. And I don't know if all of you have been into like the DMV or something, but you can be as charming as you want, and you're probably not going to get into the front of the line any faster. So that's probably something to consider as you're moving forward with this Venus Pluto square. So maybe some challenging relationship conversations as well that are regarding individuality within our relationships also. Because there's a lot of energy right now towards, individuating and saying, I just want to be me. I want to be myself. And that may bring up some tough conversations in our life. Okay. And that's the final aspect that Venus is going to make in her exile before the next day she moves into Taurus. Yay. So now we have Venus in the first decan of Taurus in its own domicile. She's much happier here, able to be more receptive rather than rash or pursuing of things. She's letting them come to her. There is potential to plan well with Venus in the first decan of Taurus. This is a planning decan where we may be able to utilize the Mercury ruled face of Taurus to be able to, see what the potential is for growth. Okay. Like this is where you're plotting out your garden before you actually plant the seeds and things like that. And a little bit of preparation may go a long way here. So it's a great time for preparation and having the resources you need come to you to prepare for the fertility cycle. As we move forward to the 29th, we're going to see Mars making its conjunction with Jupiter. Oh boy. So this one, I'm a little bit nervous about this one actually. On the plus side, it could represent that moment where you're finally able to take action under your own power, and that you could bring honor and merit by taking action under your own power. On the negative side, potentially in the collective, everybody may be trying to take action under their own individual power, and that could lead to some conflicts. When everybody wants to have their own way, inevitably you're going to butt heads, like two male rams fighting for territory. So there could be some explosive energy here with Mars and Jupiter coming together. I believe this aspect, there was a Jupiter-Mars aspect when there was like this fertilizer fire in what was that country? Beirut or something like that. This was a while ago. This was a couple years ago. But I remember with Jupiter and Mars coming together, it was a huge explosion type of thing. So I guess be very careful about how you direct your energy, how you assert yourself, because the conflict could be blown out of proportion. It could get big if you are trying to deal with that. There could be positive sides to it. But again, we always have to kind of look at both sides of a astrological aspect. And the final thing that we have on May the 30th is a new moon. So we have a new moon in Gemini. Happy heavenly birthday to my mom on May 30th here. And we will have a new start in the Gemini area of our life. So take a look at where Gemini falls in your chart. Recognize that this will be yet another signpost with a proliferation of options, a proliferation of new things that we could explore, new avenues that we could be looking at. And new social types of opportunities as well. Gemini season for me, Gemini is on my 11th house. So in Gemini season, there's always like, I've gone to conferences. There was like the UAC conference during Gemini season for me. I participate in like group classes and things like that. So communication may be enhanced around this period of time. We're still in the midst of a Mercury retrograde. And at the end of the month, Mercury is going to be emerging as the morning star when it separates by 15 degrees. And it's going to start turning direct at that point. So very shortly at the beginning of June, Mercury stations direct right around this 26 degrees of Taurus. So again, a moment of phasis where, there's going to be an omen that's speaking, especially maybe in your Taurus area of your chart, that's worth paying attention to, messages that you will receive, something finally moving forward in a way that is hopefully that has redone some of maybe the mistakes that you made previously. And again, don't beat yourself up for those mistakes. I would highly encourage you to take things slow over the next month or so, but sometimes you just have to do stuff. Sometimes you just have to take an action, and you can't do it perfectly, and you'll have the opportunity to redo it, is what I'm saying. So that is the month of May. So to summarize and put a bow on this at the end of the show, thank you all for sticking around and for all the beautiful comments and donations. If you want to donate to what we're doing here, there's a super chat, or you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. Please hit that like button if you're still around. That's always the easiest thing you can do. And just your presence is valued by me here. Let's talk about the guinea pig a little bit, and then the I-Ching. So the guinea pig, I like to use this book. It's called Animal Frequency by Melissa Alvarez. It's sort of like my tarot deck for animal symbols. And I just flip through randomly and pick one for these lunations. And the guinea pig, according to Melissa Alvarez, symbolizes spiritual growth, connecting with like-minded people, welcoming new ideas, flexibility. They're very social animals. They enjoy affection with one another. So I think that as we move into Gemini season, reaching out to your community, being open to new ideas and new perspectives is very important. Sometimes when we see things in a different way, through exploring a different tributary in our life, that can help us to be more effective and efficient. They talk about watching your diet with the guinea pig. Guinea pigs have difficulty producing vitamin C, and they also can't sweat. So, make sure you're getting enough vitamin C, make sure you're taking care of your body. They also have difficulty seeing what is right in front of them, which causes them to overeat sometimes. So, looking at things from multiple angles and perspectives can be helpful, because if we get too myopic, if we get too focused on what's right in front of us, we may miss all the peripheral things. And that's what Gemini is really good at, is showing us all the things from every different angle, exploring, right? Expanding all of our options and perspectives. A guinea pig also takes lots of short naps, apparently. So if there's a lot going on in your life, and there will be in May, try to take some rest every once in a while. You may not get the big nap, you may not get the big relaxation, but you can steal a moment here and there to take care of yourself and practice good self-care. There are also avid groomers, guinea pigs. They shed a lot. I had a guinea pig when I was a kid, and they just shed all over the place. But if you're grooming them properly, that probably helps a little bit. They make these interesting little squeaks, so they're communicating all the time. But maybe practice good hygiene and self-care around this period of time. Make sure you're taking a shower, and make sure you take care of your body, get good sleep. I can't emphasize enough how much more difficult facing the ups and downs of our life is when we're sleep deprived, and when we're dehydrated, and when we're hungry. This is coming from a Taurus moon. Trust me. Eat, sleep, drink water, rest, and you will be much more grounded and centered, especially when life is throwing you all sorts of challenges. I know that I'm at my absolute worst when I'm hungry, tired, or thirsty. So take good care of yourself. And the hexagram that I have today is number 49. And number 49 translates to revolution, molting, shedding old skin, metamorphosis, transformation, out with the old, which is perfect for eclipse season, right? Especially one that is bringing in, the serpentine energy of Scorpio, and, also of Algol and Medusa, right? With the snakes with the head and for the hair. And there's a changing line that is moving us to hexagram 43, which is called resolution, determination, decisiveness, speaking forthrightly, elimination, eradicating remaining evils, parting, cutting off, breakthrough. And that changing line is the second line. And it says, when one's own day comes, one may create revolution. Starting brings good fortune, no blame. All right, so in the translation that I like, which is called The Laws of Change by Jack M. Balkin, and I look at multiple translations when I'm doing this, but that's my favorite. He talks about reaching a point where change is necessary. It is time to move forward, but he talks about planning thoroughly, gathering support from friends and associates, right? Like the guinea pig, being social, tapping into that Gemini energy, being firmly committed to new success and to the new quote unquote order that he is talking about. Half measures aren't going to work this time around. It's time to take the mantle of the new narrative that is playing out. If you're just committing to it intellectually, he says, that's a half measure. So spiritually and emotionally commit to your new reality rather than just the ideal of it. Take some action, be all in. If you're holding back, the outcome can never be as good as if you fully commit to something. The right inner attitude can help you put all these pieces in place, as within, so without, as above, so below. If you're conflicted inside, the results that you have externally are also going to reflect that inner conflict. So try to get into harmony with yourself as you move forward. And then just make a new start. Sometimes you don't have to have it all figured out. We're going into a place where the eclipses sometimes bring blindness, right? The lights are shut off on some level. Sometimes we just have to take a leap of faith during eclipse season and utilize that beginner's mind. I like to talk about when I do my tutoring and my teaching. One method is beginning with the end in mind. So having a goal can help you figure out what you're going to do next. So the goal could change too. You don't have to necessarily stick to that end goal, but if you have at least an idea of the big picture of where you're heading, that can really tell you and inform you what kind of steps you would take next. So having that beginner's mind, having a strong vision, and again, commit to it, show up. It's going to be hard. The new thing is always scary. It's always feels overwhelming, but you got this. Remember the times that you've been through where you started something new and scary and eventually you figured it out and it became like second nature to you, like riding that bike, You fell off a few times. You skinned your knee. You cried. A mom or dad carried you back to the house and dressed your wounds. You had the support of your community. But eventually you got right back on that bike and you learned, and there was freedom and sovereignty that came with that new vehicle that you mastered. And this eclipse season is much like that. And remember that you've gone through it before, and you'll have to continue to do it as we go through and embrace the changes in our life. All right, my friends, I think that's what I've got for you today. I'm just taking a look at the chat, see if there's any final comments. Henry is saying, I'm so looking forward to Venus and Taurus, especially with Gemini full moon. A full moon, interesting because of the first lunation since the eclipse and Mars retrograde starting here in a few months. Yeah, that's something on the horizon. Mars is going to be retrograding in Gemini, so maybe some backtracking with that. Dimfy says, guinea pig naps sound familiar over the last days after hard work outside. And I have to start watching the diet. Yeah, you and me both, Dimfy. I'm getting a little bit of the winter pudge, the middle-age little spare tire here. Too much granola, like too many carbs. Sometimes when you're just busy, you just want what's easy that you can just shove in your face. You know, that's one of my challenges is I have to take my time and make the food instead of just being like, what is easy? And that's how you can make a healthier choice. All right. So my friends, that's what I've got for you today. Again, I want to just say thank you so much for being here with me today. Please, please, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Sign up for the Decans of Taurus. Reach out for a reading or for tutoring. I love teaching. Maybe we can set up some kind of guided exploration of Demetra's work as well. And again, just roll with the changes. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Appreciate you so much as a community. And we'll all get through this time together. And looking forward to seeing you all the next time, okay? All right, my friends. Take care and have a good one. Peace.